who's ready for a trip down memory lane as we take a look at this old school baby? Oh, seriously? So here we are, guys, table down, or should I say floor down. Yeah, I'm filming this part from my kitchen floor. My desk and the room that it's in is currently occupied, and it's not, let's just say it's not accessible to me at the moment. So yeah, we're doing it from the kitchen floor, no expense spared, eh? Look at this luxury studio environment. But yeah, here we are anyway. 3rd edition codex, very special codex to me. It's really nostalgic because it was this codex which was my first Ork Codex, and it's an awesome book. Very thin by today's standards. Only has, how many pages does it have? Does it even have page numbers on it? 30, around about 40 pages, so wafer thin by today's standard. But what's inside is awesome. It may not be, maybe lacking a little bit in quantity, but the quality within is good, and there's quite a lot of goodness crammed into this codex. So yeah, this, like I said, was my first Ork Codex. This codex came out for 3rd edition, 40k. And that would have been 1999, I believe. See, yeah, there we are. Copyright Games Workshop Limited, 1999. Whew, it's almost 20 years old. Jeez, where does the time go, hey? Orcs actually haven't changed very much from this codex. This was something of a sort of a rebirth for the Orcs. This is where a lot of their lore got enhanced and changed. We had some change just in the sculpts and the models, and it was actually the Orcs that came out alongside this codex that we're still using today. The boys and a few various other models have been still in production and still used to this day, some of which have only just very recently been discontinued, like the buggy, etc. But anyway, let's take a look at this. So this will be a new experience for some of you younger people out there, and for some of you veterans this will be sparking nostalgia right now. So we get some cool units laid out, some Storm boys and various other boys up there. Cool piece of artwork here. And this book is by Andy Chambers. Had some other people involved, like Gavin Thorpe, Alan Perry, a few other familiar names in there. Some good artwork as well. John Blanche, Alex Boyd. Yeah, there is some awesome artwork in this book. We get the usual introduction, as is common in all codexes, and this is still very similar to what's in the codex today and all the codexes in between. Just talks to you a little bit about the joys of collecting an Ork army. You know, the possibilities of conversion, how entertaining the games can be, especially with the very random nature, at least during this time, of the Orks. And we get some good little, I love these little bits of fluff and that, things like a data transmission coming in, reporting about War Gorbad, how it's breached their orbital defences, and even now Ork attack ships and assault boats are landing forces on the planet. So it sounds like they're in trouble. All outer defences overrun. Orcs are engaged in street fighting throughout the city. Supplies running low and fighting forces shattered. Collapse of all resistance estimated at 6 days maximum. Commend our souls to the Emperor. No further transmissions. So sounds like we were successful in this little battle. You get a lot of these dotted throughout the book. It's a cool piece of artwork there. It's awesome looking Scarboy or Knob. And at this time the brazen god of war cast up a great lord to lead the savages forth. The Book of War. Sort of sounds like they're talking about Ghazghkull there. And the army list section, talking about how to build your army list with the good old fashioned Force Org chart. Very different from today. You didn't get to choose different Force Org charts depending on detachments. You just had this. That's where you'd always start your army. 1 HQ, 2 troops, and then build from there. Yeah, very different now. Very different now. Which is better in some ways, worse in others. We do have a lot more freedom as players now to build our armies the way we want. However, it's a system that can be abused a little bit more, I think. It goes into the Orc special rules, and a lot of these will be quite familiar. Some special rules regarding mixed armour. The Orc mob rule. So here we are. This is a rule that's been tweaked and changed and buffed, nerfed different times, but an Orc mob has to check morale and test for pinning from barrages and snipers in the same way as any other unit. However, if the mob fails a test, it will immediately check size by rolling 2d6. If the score is equal to or less than the number of Orcs, not including Gretchen, left in the mob, then the Orcs carry on, confident in belief there are enough of them left to win. Their courage is bolstered by their comrades, spurring them on to battle. This means that an Orc mob of 12 models or more will always fight on, regardless of any casualties it might have received. See, it's very similar now. Leadership tests are different, so this exact rule wouldn't have been able to stick around because the game itself is different in the way we do leadership tests. But we have a very similar rule these days. And it was at this time where it was really, this was a really, really strong factor, especially for armies using large mobs of boys. As long as you got over 12, they're effectively fearless. And even when they dwindle a little bit below that, they've still got a very high leadership. So you really have to chip them down before you start making them fall back. And then mobbing up. There you go. Mob up is not a new thing. It's not a new stratagem and a new fancy rule. It is a sort of a rework of some old school stuff. Another thing that a lot of younger players, people who have just got into the hobby and things, might not realise is that a lot of what they see as new things when new codexes and things come out are often just harking back to the past and going back to 3rd, 2nd, or even Rogue Trader editions. So yeah, mobbing up. Orcs falling back can attempt to regroup as normal if there are enough of them left. But this rarely happens, as Orcs will only withdraw once most of them are dead. However, an Orc unit of any size can attempt to join another mob, or in other words, mob up. So yeah, it's a very similar rule to what we've got now, except we don't use it as a stratagem. It's just an army-wide rule. And falling back and things was very different then. Your units would actually literally fall back. They would turn around and run away, and you'd have to move them back towards your board edge until they'd run off the edge of the board and disappear. So it's again very different to how the game's played now in terms of taking leadership tests, but it's great that they've modified that rule and brought that back in the form of a stratagem, and a really cool stratagem it is too. But we're not talking about 8th edition, we're talking about 3rd edition. Iconic piece of artwork there. I've used that as a thumbnail and background image on a couple of my videos now. Awesome looking runt herd with grots. The grots just look really cool. Savage little bastards. Love them. It's talked about the power of the War. and how that's an actual special rule within the game rather than just an aura ability of a war boss. It's a sort of army-wide rule. To represent the power of the Waaagh, when an Ork mob charges into close combat, check its size by rolling 2d6. If the score is equal to or under the number of Orks left in the mob, they charge in with a rousing Waaagh. All the Orks in the mob double their initiative characteristic for the rest of the assault phase. So that's nice. That would put them at the time on par with Space Marines and some Eldar units and things, so they'd be hitting at the same time. Because remember, this is back in 3rd edition when initiative was a thing. Talks about Gretchen mobs and how they're exceptionally cowardly. And there's some special sort of nerfs to their rules and things, and how they have to take leadership tests, and basically they're grots. They run away a lot. And then we've got this. Look at this, the Ork Armory War Gear section. Look at all these options. Wow. These are bits of codexes that I really missed today. I'll read the top bit for you. Ork characters may have up to 2 single-handed weapons or 1 single-handed weapon and 1 two-handed weapon. You may also pick up to 40 points of extra war gear for each character from the war gear list, 80 points for an Ork war boss, and 60 points for a big mech or pain boss. So yeah, look at the freedom you've got there. 80 points, big page full of stuff, go shopping. And you could really come up with some interesting things. There are restrictions on certain things, like for example the Mega Armor is for war boss and nobs only. Mega Booster is only for models equipped with Mega Armor. Mech Boys Tools just for Mech Boys, Squig Hounds, Slaves. So you've got a few things that are restricted, but you do have a lot of other things. A custom job, Mordaka, Blaster, Shootier. Very cool. Heavy Armor, Cyborg Body, Boss Pole, Bionic Bonce, Bionic Arm, Big Horns, Iron Gob, Attack Squig, Ammo Runt. And then you've got the vehicle section. Yeah, it was good fun back then, making bosses and leaders and stuff. They've kind of replaced this kind of thing now with, you've got like shiny gubbins and warlord traits and things. So you can still heavily modify your war boss. But I did used to love, in any codex, going through these and, you know, cramming as much loot and stuff on your character as you can and really building something quite individual. And yeah, I kind of miss it. It's very cool. I mean, in comparison, let's have a look at this, the 8th edition codex, and there's your war gear list. Just this little section here. It doesn't quite compare, does it? But that is the past. And then we're straight into it. Straight into the army lists and all the data sheets. So we were into the headquarters section. We've got the war boss, who was 60 points at the time. Weapon skill 5, ballistic skill 2, strength 5, toughness 4, 3 wounds, initiative 4, 4 attacks, leadership 9, and a 6+ save. And you didn't have it as a separate option. So you didn't have like a war boss and a mega armored war boss. You had a war boss, and then you could equip him with heavy armor or mega armor and various guns and axes and, you know, power claws, whatever you fancied. And then you had your war boss's bodyguard, because again, this was back at a time when independent characters could join units, so he could form a unit with a retinue of bodyguard. And of course, his bodyguard would be the nobs. Back then, they were 20 points each. Only strength 4, toughness 4. Still had 2 wounds. And then you could also have mech boys in there. You could have up to 2 mech boys in the bodyguard, and up to 2 mad docs. And then you've got your war truck, where it is armed with either a big shooter or a rocket launcher. We no longer have the rocket launcher as an option. And these things back then, oh, they were so weak. Front armor 10, so basically they could be destroyed by one bolt around. They were yeah, they were weak, put it that way. But exceptionally fast. You only needed these to survive for one turn. You basically needed to hide them on the first turn, and then when you get first turn, just round them up the board as fast as you can, and let all your boys jump out and stuff. Transports were, I think, a lot more useful then. They were actually used as a delivery system, whereas now I think most of us use transports as a shooting platform. And we've got other HQ choices. We've got the Big Mech, and the Big Mech could have a bodyguard of mech boys, so that's very cool. You could have a Big Mech surrounded by his lesser minions. A Pain Boss, yep, that was when a Pain Boy was a HQ choice, which is quite cool. And look, this is cool. Pain Boss's bodyguard, Cyborgs. And the Cyborgs have an invulnerable saving throw. So yeah, all his mad creations and Frankenstein-esque orcs that have been crippled in battle and he's tinkered with and can form his bodyguard. So that gave great conversion possibilities. You could have all sorts of half orc, half machine kind of things. And as I said, there's loads of little cool tidbits of sort of fluff and bits about them and the sides, and cool little bits of artwork. I love some of this old iconic black and white artwork. Then we're into the elite section. So yeah, just 2 pages there of HQ, but a lot of choice and scope and options within that. So yeah, elites, you've got us, you've got the Storm Boys. They haven't really changed a whole lot. They're very similar to what they were before. The mob is equipped with jump packs. See the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook for details. So yeah, they were basically just jump packers, just like Space Marines and things. I think it was later on when they got the special rule where they could sort of advance and things and roll to see if any of them got injured and things. Probably a bit more reliable back then, but less in the way of special rules. We've got the Commandos. They haven't really changed, although they did have more options, I think, then in terms of the weapons they can bring. Up to 1 model in the mob can be armed with either a big shooter at +8 points, rocket launcher at +5 points, or burner at +6 points. The mob may have frag stick bombs at 1 point per model, or crack stick bombs at 2 points per model, and or tank buster bombs at 3 points per model. So yeah, Commandos with tank buster bombs. That would be pretty cool today. And then we had to pay for our knob upgrades then. That sounded wrong. For an additional cost of +11 points, 1 commando may be upgraded to a knob. So I like that in the current edition, actually, that we get our sort of squad sergeants and squad leaders and stuff as free upgrades. That's quite cool, I think. Then we got Ard Boys, back when they had their own section. One of my favourite units. Quite expensive back then. 12 points a model. Mind you, having said that, boys were more expensive back then, as we'll see. So, yeah, you were only paying a little bit more. And the mob consists of between 5 and 20 Ard Boys. So you can have a squad of 5. I can't imagine they would achieve much. The models in the mob may be armed with either a shooter or slugger and chopper. You may have a mixture of weapons within the mob. Up to 3 models in the mob can be armed with either a big shooter, rocket launcher, or burner. The entire mob, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that was cool. So this is very screams Bad Moons to me. See, I'd love Ard Boys to be a bit like this now, where they could have access to some better weapons, or certainly more. So, you know, you could have five of them, and 3 of them armed with big shooters. So it's quite a cool little Dakar mob. For an additional cost of +16 points, one of the boys may be upgraded to a knob. Cool. So Ard Boys knob, quite expensive. Then we have Scar Boys, another unit that's just come back. 11 points a model. And what made them so good back then? Because they were the 6+ save, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 1. They were stronger. They were strength 4, so they were much like they're represented with the stratagem now. They're somewhere between boys and knobs. So yeah, they don't have the 2 wounds that knobs have, but they do have the strength 4. We had flash gits. This was before we had models for flash kits. At this time, there was no flash kit models. Well, there was no Scarboy models, or Ardboys actually. I think they did release a kit for Ardboys later on, which was just the boys squad with extra bits of armour chucked in there. But they never did that for Scarboys, to my knowledge. I might be wrong on that. But I certainly know that flash kits, you had to create your own, which was really cool. And they were a bit different. There's the entire mob may be given 1 custom job for their shooters. So they had normal shooters, but they were customised. And you could make them shootier, or blaster, or more dacker. And then up to 4 models can either have a big shooter, a rocket launcher, or a burner. So yeah, there was a lot less weapons back then. They didn't have their own snaz guns. They just had customised shooters, and quite a few of them could have access to some special weapons. Quite cool, I think. I like the sound of that. That'd be a fun unit to convert these days, like that. So yeah, in the troops we got Slugger Boys, 9 points per model. I'd completely forgotten they cost that much. Mind you, back then everything cost a little bit more than it did now, predominantly anyway. I think around this time a Space Marine was 15 points a model. I certainly remember that Necrons were 18 points a model during this time, so everything was more expensive in points back then. So, and then Shooter Boys were 8 points. And they kept flip-flopping and reversing this. I think it was a later edition where Shooter Boys were the more expensive one. I think that was during 7th. I don't know why they ever differentiate between the points, really, because one, has an advantage in one area, but one has an advantage in the other. They're both essentially equal. It's just that they're better at different things. So yeah, I don't really know why they did that. But yeah, they haven't really changed a whole lot. It's just that now all our boys are strength 4 as standard, which makes them so much better. And we don't have to worry about initiative. But everything else is essentially exactly the same stats. And again, back then, the mob consists of between 10 and 30 shooter boys, up to 3 models. So you didn't need to have 1 in every 10. You could have a mob of 10 and 3 of them could. So yeah, you could really specialise your squads a lot more then, and include more of the special weapons than you can these days. Certainly in smaller squads anyway. And then we've even got stick bombers. See, boys with stick bombs had their own unit. And they could be equipped with tank buster bombs at an additional cost. I remember the squad for that. It was just a boys squad in a box filled with arms with stick bombs. Then we've got the good old burner boys. I think burner boys were very good back then. Cheap as well. Mind you, not the entire squad had burners. Only 4, up to 4 models in the mob could have burners. And the mob consisted of between 5 and 10. Could be led by a mech boy. So I suppose you could have 5, because you could have the mech boy could have a burner, because he can select from the Ork armory, and then the other 4. So you could have a squad of 5 with burners. So yeah, very similar to what it is now. Good old tank busters. I don't think these had a unit yet either. I think these were, when I say had a unit, I mean had a kit, had a set out. I don't think these got a set until quite a bit later. The mob consisted between 5 and 10, and they're armed with slugger, close combat weapon, frags, stick bombs, and tank buster bombs. Up to 3 models in the mob can be armed with a rocket launcher. So only 3 of them had rocket launchers. And then their special rule, Tank Hunters, was very different then. The mob always passes tank shock tests and adds +1 to all armor penetration rolls. Yeah, that's pretty good. But they were never going to hit anything because they didn't have any rules to increase their accuracy or anything against vehicles. If they hit, they did a bit more damage. But yeah, tank busters weren't great back then. They've just been buffed and just continue to get better with each edition. Gretchen mobs, still 3 points a model, and I think the stat line has not changed a bit. Well, it has changed a little bit actually, because yeah, back then grots were no more accurate than orcs. Ballistic skill of 2, so they got better. They didn't get a save at all back then in their stats, not even a 6+. But they had special rules. Living shield. Orcs are adept at using grots to draw enemy fire. Any orc mobs which are shot at through a grot mob can claim a 5+ cover saving throw. Each save made by the orcs means one of the grots must be removed as a casualty. So yeah, they've harked back to this rule with the grot shield stratagem. I think this was the sort of simpler way to do it, but it's cool nonetheless that we got it back. Mine clearance. This is something that never came up in any of the games I played because I never really mucked around with minefields. But grots are sometimes charged across minefields to make the mines safe before the orcs have to cross. If a grot mob moves into a minefield, take off 3d6 grots as casualties and then remove the minefield marker. If there aren't enough grots in the mob to satisfy the casualty quota, the minefield remains in play and the grot mob is wiped out. So yeah, there you go. You could have a big mob of grots and just clear a minefield with them. I imagine that would have been good in games that used those. I never mucked about with any of that. Truck boys, look at this, fast attack. So this was again very different from where you would just take a transport and put a unit in it. You actually had a specific unit. Truck boys were a fast attack choice. The truck boys mob consists of between 5 and 10 orc boys. To one of the boys can have a special weapon. One of the boys may be upgraded to a knob, and the mob must be mounted in a war truck at an additional cost of 30 points. See the war truck entry on page 8 for details. And then we got the good old war buggies and war tracks as one unit. The squadron consists of between 1 and 3 war buggies / war tracks. Could be armed with twin link big shooter, twin link rocket launcher, a mega blaster, or a scorcher. So yeah, that was before they split it into sort of, you used to have 3 separate units: war buggies, war tracks, scorchers. Back then it was just war buggies and war tracks, and you could choose between the different options. War bikes squadron. Now is this the one where they had the, yeah, there you go, the hard to hit rule, which I know a lot of people want back. As war bikes career across the battlefield, they kick up vast quantities of dust and oily exhaust fumes. This gives them a 5+ saving throw as if they were in cover. Furthermore, if an enemy shoots through a unit of war bikes to hit another orc unit behind it, the orc unit behind counts as in cover too. The war bike's pollution cover has no effects in close combat. So yeah, there was where they, I think this was the birth of this sort of rule where they were kicking up like dust clouds and protect them. So yeah, although I think it was in the next edition where they had it in the 4th edition codex, in which they got a 5+ invulnerable save from their dust cloud. So I think that got even better later on. And then that's it for fast attack. That's our options. Pretty slim. Truck boys, war buggies, and bikes. And then heavy support. We got the big guns battery. The battery consists of between 1 and 3 big guns and 2 Gretchen crew per big gun. Definitely not as good then as they are now, because you had the old ballistic skill of 2. They were fairly cheap though, and they could either have lobbers, zap guns, or cannon. This is another unit that's no longer with us. It's been fully replaced by the mech guns that didn't even exist at this time. A special rule there. Hits on the battery. When a battery of guns is fired at, randomise any hits between the crew and the guns themselves by rolling d6. 1 to 4 hits the crew, 5 to 6 hits a gun. Hits against the Gretchen crew are resolved as normal. Guns count as vehicles with an armour value of 10. Any penetrating or glancing hits, destroy them. Right, so big guns were very, very easy to kill back then as well. Jeez. But they were cheap. They were a cheap way to get some DACA into your army. They still are, really. And then we've got looters. And I think this was the... let's move the camera a bit so we can see. 10 points a model. Armed with shooters plus options below. So looters are allowed to use the options of one of the following squad types as detailed in the army list in the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, 3rd edition 40k, much like 8th edition, was a complete sort of revamp of the rules and the way the game worked. And so all the codexes had to be redone again. And unlike recently where we've had indexes, which came out alongside 8th edition, back then they actually included pages of stand-in rules in the actual rulebook itself. So you got the rulebook, and within that it had essentially codexes for several different armies. And this is basically telling you that to represent looters, they don't have their own war gear section. You can select from the Space Marine Tactical Squad, Devastator Squad, Scout Squad. So yeah, you could have Ork Snipers, Imperial Guard, Infantry Squad, Fire Support Squad, Anti-Tank Squad. And it gives you some examples then. So for the example they've given here, you might choose to use the weapon options for an Imperial Guard Infantry Squad for your looters. This would give them up to 1 plasma gun, melter gun or flamer, and 1 heavy weapon, which could be either a heavy bolter, missile launcher, las cannon, autocannon or mortar. Alternatively, a squad's options from any one army list entry may be used as long as both players agree. So look at that, you didn't even have to be restricted to Space Marine Imperial Guard. You could have looted from Eldar, Dark Eldar or anything else, Chaos even, as long as both players agreed. So they were proper looters. They properly had looted weapons, literally stolen from other factions. If you roll a 1 to hit with a looted weapon, a hit is scored on the unit shooting with the weapon instead of the target. The opponent gets to roll to wound, etc. So the Ork player gets to allocate any wounds, and they don't have to be allocated to the model who fired the weapon that rolled the 1. The oops, sorry mate rule. So one of the looters has accidentally shot one of his own comrades. It's very, very cool. There's lots of little funny little tidbits like that in here. The humour, the Ork humour is rife in this book. We got on to the Ork Dreadnought. That's right, Dreadnought, not Death Dread. The Ork Dreadnought has a crew of 1 Ork. It is armed with 2 Dreadnought close combat weapons, power claws usually, and 2 chosen from among the following: rocket launcher, big shooter, mega blasters, scorchers. So this hasn't really changed much at all in all the editions. Yeah, it's very similar. It's talking there about how its stats will change depending on which weapons are destroyed, because again back then shooting at vehicles was very different. You could pick off weapons, and so it could have weapons destroyed during the game. And then we've got Killer Can. And look, Killer Cans then were not piloted by Grots. The Can has a crew of 1 Ork. It says killer cans are smaller and less sophisticated Ork dreadnoughts. Although lightly armoured, they retain the deadly power claws of their larger cousins, making them dangerous foes at close quarters. So yeah, this was back when they were just as powerful as Death Dreads in combat, because they had the same weapon. They didn't have like the can claw, but they weren't as accurate because they had ballistic skill 2, and they were piloted by Orks, not Grots. Then we've got the battle wagon and the looted vehicle. There you go. Now this, let's just take a close look at this because we want to see this. The looted vehicle, points variable. You may include one looted vehicle worth 51 plus points, or one of 3 vehicles worth 50 points or less. Even though you can include more than one vehicle, they count as a single heavy support choice. Type. A looted vehicle may be chosen from one of the following army list entries in the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook: Space Marines, Rhino, Razorback, Predator Annihilator, Predator Destructor, Land Raider, and also from the Imperial Guard: Chimera, Hellhound, Griffin, Leman Russ Battle Tank, Leman Russ, Demolisher, Basilisk. Although the cost for a looted vehicle remains the same as it was in its parent army list, its ballistic skill is reduced to 2 because it's crewed by Orks. Also, note that the model for a looted vehicle must be converted and or painted appropriately to show it is being used by Orks. Simply borrowing a Leman Russ from an Imperial Guard army is not allowed. And we've got some options here. The looted vehicle may be given any weapons option permitted from its army list. For example, a Leman Russ battle tank may be given a heavy flamer or heavy bolter sponsons at a cost of 10 points each. A looted vehicle may use Ork vehicle upgrades. How exciting would it have been to read that for the first time? I remember reading this and ideas of how to convert all these vehicles started filling my head. Being able to use the options from them plus the vehicle upgrade options, you can come up with all sorts of craziness. Absolutely brilliant. I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again, certainly not in match play. Special rules: looted vehicles. Make a breakdown test for each looted vehicle at the start of each turn. Roll a d6, on a 1 roll again on the table below. So you just got to test for breakdown. If you roll a 1, you break down, and then you've got to roll on the table to see what happens. So you roll a 1, may not move this turn, roll again on this table next turn. 2 to 3, may not move this turn. And then 4 to 6, don't press that wah. The vehicle lurches forward 2d6 straight ahead. Make dangerous terrain, tank shock tests, etc. as if the vehicle were moving normally. The vehicle counts as moving the distance rolled on the dice and may not make any further moves this turn. So yeah, that could work in your favour and that could work against you. But very cool. Very fluffy. Very, very cool. Yeah, love it. Good memories from that. That's it's a shame they don't do stuff like that in codexes anymore. And then we got here all about starting a war, talking about where to begin. Showing a typical starting army with a war boss and 2 mobs of boys. I have this war boss model. He's awesome. I love him. Let me go on to what's in the army. Some cool screenshots here of some of the war tracks and buggies. And the truck, can you believe it? The old school truck. It's almost the same size as the buggies. Old school Death Dread and cans. I think these would still be very usable in a game today. I think you mix these cans in with the new ones, same with this. I don't think they'd look out of place at all. I think these are great models that have stood the test of time. I like the newer ones better, but I do like these old school ones. There's a certain charm to them. We've got the old big guns that are no longer with us. I know a lot of people are sad about that. And then look at this. Look how different this is. Expanding your army. And this is Adrian Wood's War Grishnak. And look, within an official GW Codex, we've got scratch build models. Check out the awesome looking battle wagon. I've seen pictures of that as well, and it's just I really like this. Very cool. And look, his boys literally piled into the truck. I think that comes from the old Gorka Morka rules, where you used to be able to transport as many Ork models as you could physically fit within the truck. And yeah, heavily modified and converted vehicles and stuff. It's not the sort of thing they do now. We've got another one here as well. Andy Chambers Blitz Boys. Again, highly converted. We've got a scratch build Death Dread there. You just never see stuff like that in codexes now. Scratch built conversions, kit bashes. Talks about the various Ork tactics you can use, and it's quite good. It talks about in here how Ork players make the mistake of just sometimes surging forward and piling in is the right way to go, but you do actually have to be quite canny as an Ork player. We've got various tactics here. They go over the War Track Rumble, Dread Bash, Swamp 'em. Good old Horde army. And then we've got talking about painting the Ork skin, dry brushing, different techniques. So look, this was a really good book. Like I say, it was a thin book, but there's a lot of good stuff crammed in here. Just loads of inspirational bits. Talks about the different clans, paint schemes and things that go with them, modelling sort of opportunities and things, so you get a real feel for what sort of each clan's about and what it looks like. Different versions of snake bites you can go with. Same with the Bad Moons. Ork with a converted rocket launcher, tank buster there. And yeah, as you can see, these same Ork models still with us today, and they have aged amazingly. I think certain ones like this, they didn't age so well, hence why they've been replaced. But these boys, they look just as good now as they did then. And back then they looked incredible. And this was a big change in this codex. This was where boys and Orks themselves became a lot more hench and a lot more brutish and muscular and bigger and bulkier and meaner looking. As you'll see on my next video, when we go back and look at the 2nd edition Ork Codex, Orks looked very different back then. You got some of the Death Skulls, you got the Braveheart theme going on there. I think the movie hadn't been out that long at this time, so you could see the clear inspiration, the blue war paints and stuff. Blood axes, talking about different camo schemes and stuff. Evil Sons, so you got your truck boys there. No mention of, no, I was about to say no mention of freebooters, but here they are. Freebooter warbands are either made up of mobs of lots of different clans or mobs that don't belong to a clan at all. They just don't care as long as they're where the fighting is at. And it talks about how you can make up your own colour scheme. Again, more cool conversions. Powerclaw looks pretty badass. A little bit about Ork glyphs, a bit of their language and old school truck, and look at the old school war bikes. Some of these models, they've got a charm to them for back then, but by today's standards they'd look terrible. But then, like I say, ones like this aged really well. Others, not so much. There's just so much inspiration in here. And look at this, conversions. Orcs have looted weapons, heavy bolters, missile launchers, Ardboys, Scarboy. Adrian Wood's crazy Stormboy conversion. Gyrocopter type thing. There's so many hints and tips on here on how to do your battle damage and stuff. And look, telling you to scratch build stuff. They would never do this now. And he used tank turrets to make the bodies for his Ork dreadnoughts. Very cool. Again, truck heavily modified and converted. Old school buildings. Now, I want some buildings that look like this. I love this. And this is saying that you can even have a go at making your own Ork buildings. This one was made from a furniture drawer. And it looks really cool. I love this sort of aesthetic of sort of mud huts and shanty towns of Orks. I've definitely used pictures like this for inspiration for my scenery. Again, more inspirational bits of huge battles. The Battle of Big Tooth River was created as a display for Games Day 97. Their displays have come on a long way, but at the time this would have been like the coolest thing you'd ever seen. It looks pretty amateurish by today's standards, but this, however, I love. Look at this. A gargant made from card, tubing and lots of scavenged bits from kits and other models. That looks really, really cool. I really like it. I wonder if Forge World will ever make a 40k scale gargant one day. That would be a sight to behold. Look at the converted Squigoth. Look at that thing. Leading one of the columns of Orks through the outlying Ork buildings is the huge scratch-built Squigoth. Oh, look at the Evil Sons mob racing over the hills. You can see how painting and stuff has just come on such a long way since then. Not that these are painted bad, it's just a different time, you know. And here we are, look at this. I would happily have that vehicle in my army today. That looks brilliant, even by today's standards. You can see he's used a paint roller or something as a death roller. It looks like Chimera, and you can see, I remember these old bulkhead scenery bits, just built the actual sort of compartments, and so cool. Attention to detail. You can see the grots in there trying to fix the gears and gubbins. Got a looted rhino there, which looks pretty badass actually. I'm not a fan of this one, but I admire its creativity. Ork Dreadnought by Jose Antonio. Different customized Ork War banner, and look, it says here, look, again, there's something they would never do. Nigel Carman converted his own Ghazghkull Thracker, and they're sort of saying that, look, you can create your own one, you don't need to buy ours. So probably not good business wise, but it was a different time back then. And this is more of a inspirational bits and fluff and lore, and here we are. This is where we start seeing the different castes and grot, slave, boy, warrior, Scarboy, which is a veteran, and you see just between the boy and the knob, so he's growing more, you know, more of a veteran Ork, and then eventually he'll get to knob status, leader, and then you've got war boss, dominant leader. Biggest is best, biggest is boss. And this is not, what is this? This is a report from Magos biologists talking about the growth patterns of Orks in variant societies. Basically just a human's or Imperium's view of the orcs, studying them. And then we've got all the different detail about the Ork war gear list. All these different options and things you can have. Bionic arm. What does a bionic arm do? Ork bionics are typically crude but effective. Ork bionics arms are equipped with built-in weapons as standard, be they one-shot sluggers, retractable spikes, there you go, or power stabber, ferocious creatures in cages, or something even more unsubtle. An orc with a bionic arm causes one automatic strength 4 hit in close combat with the equivalent of initiative 6, but only if in base-to-base contact with the target. The plethora of spikes, blades, and other hurty bits welded onto the arm mean it also counts as an additional close combat weapon. This may not be combined with mega armor. Pretty cool. Bionic Bonce adds 1 to the saving throw. Very nice. So that's cool. You can see all these different things give you all sorts of different abilities. Custom Mega Blaster was a little bit different then, look. Still had the gets hot rule, although it wasn't quite so dangerous because you'd get normal saves. Range 24, only a strength 7 then. AP 2, so it cut right through Terminator armor, and it was a heavy 1 blast. It was a blast weapon as well. Cool. Custom Mega Blasters were good then. Custom Force Field hasn't really changed much. Custom Force Field gives all models within 6 inch a 5+ cover saving throw. Mega Armor, I'm sure, wasn't it here that Mega Armor had the slow and purposeful rule? Maybe not. Ah, yes. Orcs in Mega Armor always move as if in difficult terrain. So you had to roll a d6 to see how far they could move. Could be very painful. You kept rolling those ones. They just would never get anywhere. Didn't have the big chopper then, we had the Ooge chopper, which was pretty much the same. Adds +2 to their strength, and their opponent's maximum save is reduced to 4+. So yeah, very similar to now actually. All of different Ork vehicle upgrades. More black and white artwork. Another iconic piece there. And some cool stories here. These stories are well worth having a read of as well, because a lot of them are written from the Ork perspective, which we don't get to see very often these days. Usually Ork lore and fluff and stuff is written from like the human's perspective, or another faction's perspective. Just sort of hearing it from the Ork's mouth is great. And then we're on to our special characters. So we got the big man himself, Ghazghkull Thraka. He was 226 points then, with a 2+ save. What were his special rules? Has +1 to his toughness. Power of War. This can be summoned at any time during an opponent's turn. For the remainder of the player's turn and all of the following player's turn, Ghazghkull gains a 2+ invulnerable save. Wow. Good stuff. So for 1 turn in the game, he's 2+ in 1 save. Only had 3 wounds back then. Oh, we didn't get as many wounds back then. And this was at a time where we could suffer from instant death as well. So if he got hit with a strength 10 weapon, boom, it's dead. Oh, Nazdreg, miss you, want you back. He was 186 points with his Custom Blaster X. It's a blast type weapon, assault, strength 7. Very nice. Just a souped up custom Mega Blaster basically.
Nasdrek is a member of the Bad Moon clan, and his well-equipped army will reflect this. If Nasdrek leads an army, it may include up to 1 extra heavy support unit over and above the numbers shown on the force organisation chart. Very cool. And he may be accompanied by a bodyguard. I love the artwork of Nasdrek. Such a cool character. I'm biased because he's Bad Moon, but it's a shame we don't have him anymore. Good old Boss Zagstruck still there. Mad Doc Grotznik. And he does look mental in that picture as well. Very cool. And he's always had some very good rules, actually. More machine than orc, the extensive rebuilding Mad Doc Grotznik has undertaken increases his toughness characteristic by 1. Bad influence. If Grotznik is part of a mob, his crazed enthusiasm for mayhem infects the boys as well. Not only do they become immune to the effects of morale and pinning, but they also move straight towards the nearest enemy and assault it if they can. So you join him with a big old mob of boys and they're all fearless. Really underrated character, I think, by a lot of players. He's really good. Fearless Orcs is nothing to be sniffed at. And then Boss Snickrot and his Red Skull Commandos. So yeah, they get all extra special rules. I think that's really cool. It adds so much personality, not just to the character themselves, but the fact that you would choose Snickrot and he wouldn't just have a unit of commandos, he would have his special unit of commandos which come with their own special rules and abilities. Opens up more conversion opportunities. Good old Wazdaka Gutsmech and his Bike of the Apocalypse. All bits about the tribes and the hierarchy. Talks about the different dominant clan characteristic. Goths, ferocity, obsession with hand-to-hand combat. Bad Moons, wealth, expensive weaponry and armour. Tribes with a dominant clan character. Some Bad Moons had the Crooked Moon, the Yellow Skull Crushers. Snakebites had the White Spiders, Scorpions, Cobras, Chargers. Very cool. So some cool sort of ideas for names for your tribe. Some cool bits here. You know not the valour of the Orcs. They believe that the more enemy there are, the more glory they will win, and the more plunder they will secure. Yeah, that's pretty much how we think. I've read this one before. This isn't in every codex, and it's just an awesome quote. So I won't read it again. And there we go. Look, it's like a science book talking about the biology of orcs and where they come from. And how they're grown from mushrooms. Their little amniotic sac underground. And I love this picture always reminds me of a scene from The Simpsons when Homer's having a brain scan and on the x-ray, and he almost looks just like that. And you get the map of the galaxy. A little bit different now. Yeah, well, there we go, guys. There we go. Don't know if it has a price on it and how much this book used to cost. I seem to remember these being about £8 back in the day. Oh, that was a big nostalgia hit for me. And like I say, we had, I think a lot of players of my sort of age, this would be their first experience of Ork Codex. And it served us for a long time. Like I say, it came out in 1999, and I think we had a good few years of use of this, all the way through 3rd edition we had this, and then for at least 90% of 4th edition. It was right near the tail end of 4th edition that the 4th edition Ork Codex came out. So yeah, we had this for a good while, and yeah, this was the beginning of orcs as we know them today. Because before this book, we had this 2nd edition Ork Codex, and that, my friends, will be coming on my next video. So until then, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell icon so you don't miss any more uploads, and I'll see you on the next one, guys. 6+ Stevo, signing out.